but they shot into the walls many times. Mother found many, many arrowheads in the walls of that fort. But they're high enough, the walls were high enough to where they couldn't shoot into it and kill any of the animals or people.
Poindexter worked with the Harpers to ensure the restoration inside and out reflected the times in which Francis lived. That included reclaiming the land from years of neglect and abuse.
Everything he's done, he has made sure that there were just carbon copies of what it had been, and he has taken care of it. He's taken care of the land. The land itself had, well, like all this land, but he has eradicated the brush over there and has changed has helped the waterings. I'm sure now there's as much water as there was when Grandpa first bought the place, because he's cut down all the brush, and that brush is what's drinking the water.
La Morita, the smallest of the three structures, constructed, we think, just before the Civil War, 1860 perhaps, 61, is in a fertile and small valley of great granite cliffs. And in that location, he ran his goat and sheep operation. La Morita is, like all three forts, filled with old legends and stories and some truth. The interesting aspects that I can testify to myself are that when La Morita was first acquired in a subsequent transaction to the original transaction, I wasn't so sure there was a fort there at all. The area was very, very rough. There was no evidence of anything but a cottage on the site, and so much of Milton Faver's legends turned out on research not to be accurate entirely. So I wasn't sure there was a fort there. But nevertheless, we decided to excavate. We went to an area that was very rough. It was filled with lots of remains of rock walls and that sort of thing. And our idea, since there was a cottage on the site, was to restore the cottage, and since it's very, very, very remote, in a canyon all by itself, with very limited means of ingress and egress, our idea was to put a hot tub next to the cottage.
La Morita is unfinished at the directive of the Texas Historical Commission. The fort has no roof and was purposely left in a state of ruin. The cottage was thought at first to be the remains of ancillary buildings. To the amazement of all, the area revealed the remains of the Fort La Morita. The lower courses of the adobe walls were arranged in a nearly square configuration and connected on all sides save the south. On the south, large stone foundations indicated previous existence of either a stone wall or an adobe wall. Other adobe debris and a distinct foundation showed that a pile of material thought to be a miniature hillock actually was the remains of an 18-foot square, two-story tower. La Morita was the scene of a tragedy. The legend lives on with the locals. Retired pharmacist Henry Daly's grandmother was the sister of Milton Faver's wife. Daly's grandfather was Faver's business partner.
One of my grandmother's brothers used to live at the Morita and took care of the place. And one time they had an Indian raid there, and they killed him, and they took his wife, and later they found her dead. They had mashed her head up against the wagon wheel, and then they took two of the boys, just young kids, with them. And it seemed that those boys never did come back, but there were stories heard that there were two white boys living with the Indians. And at one time, now, I'm a little bit fuzzy about this, but one of the boys I think came back to visit, but he was kind of wild and he just couldn't accommodate himself to the white people's ways. So I think they either ran him off or he just went on back to the Indian reservation.
Water is the source of life in the desert, and wherever we find a spring, the early settlers out here tried to make use of it. This spring here is the spring for La Morita, and this was the goat and sheep operation for Milton Faver's ranching empire in this area. This is a very good spring here that provides year-round water, and this would have provided water for the sheep and goats. This is pretty rough country here. We're in a narrow, very rocky valley, and it really wasn't well suited to a cattle operation here.
Although the life-giving waters of Cibolo flow on, the life of Milton Faver faded away among the rigors of the frontier. He died at the age of 69 on December 23, 1889. His tomb stands as a sentinel over John Poindexter's work. Cibolo Creek Ranch features a museum of Big Bend history that reflects the life of Milton Faver and his times. The walls are covered with old newspaper articles featuring stories of Faver as the cattle king of the area, and a picture of his son Juan Faver, who died in 1913. An 1863 brass cannon, like the one given to Milton Faver by the soldiers of Fort Davis to protect his forts. A collection of frontier weapons, muzzle loaders, long rifles, cabinets full of handguns, weapons that recall guns were a large part of settling the West. Names like Remington, Colt, and Winchester are all represented in the Cibolo Museum, along with military uniforms, household containers, cooking implements, and even an old metal bathtub. Pack mule harnesses, military and Western saddles in the museum are for viewing, and a modern complete tack room is open to guests who wish to ride into the mountains and at one point look down upon the nearby Rio Grande. The Big Bend attracts increasing tourism, as does Cibolo and its scenic and historic attractions, together with its numerous outdoor activities. The U.S. Department of the Interior has placed 3 separate listings for the Cibolo forts on the National Register of Historic Places. The Institute for Architecture recognized the ranch for a National Honor Award in Architectural Design and Achievement, as did the Texas Society of Architects. The ranch has been featured in numerous magazines and newspaper articles, ranging from the New York Times, Texas Monthly, Town and Country, Travel and Leisure, and Vogue magazine. The rock walls at the main fort were reconstructed in the authentic style of Milton Faver's time, placing large boulders at the base of the walls and smaller rocks near the top. The materials were readily available and were extracted from the rocky terrain surrounding the ranch. A man-made lake is stocked with fish for guests to enjoy, another of the activities offered at the ranch. Porches and verandas run along almost every side of the guest addition to offer gathering places to visit or just sit, read, or enjoy the view of the Shenandoah Mountains in the background. The nearly empty countryside calls to mind both the rugged frontier and Western ranching tradition. The movie Giant was filmed not far from Cibolo Creek. Next to the old fort, the new hacienda reflects the 19th century buildings. Guests rest and recuperate from the rigors of modern daily life. The intent of the interior design in the hacienda was to complement the restoration by outfitting the structures with authentic Mexican, Spanish, and a few American antiques. Most of the Mexican antiques came from a group of El Paso area importers who maintained spotters who travel throughout Mexico to visit building demolitions, retrieve pieces, and restore them. The rugs and ceramics for dining are all authentic Mexican design. The cattle hides come from West Texas, and the lamps are 19th century and early 20th century oil and kerosene fixtures, retrofitted for electricity. The ranch has stimulated the local economy in a variety of ways. Workers hired for the restoration and their children have become permanent employees of the ranch. Revenues from the ranch also support local scholarships and other charitable endeavors. Cowboys continue to work the ranch today, and animals that had disappeared like elk and buffalo have been brought back. Each year, the citizens of Presidio County celebrate with John Poindexter his purchase of Cibolo Creek Ranch. The legend of Milton Faver lives on.